The movement on the horizon grows slowly clearer. What first appeared as distant shapes now separates into distinct motion, several aircraft approaching in steady formation, their paths calm and deliberate against the open morning sky. The sound of their rotors spreads gradually across the fields, not loud, only persistent. A rhythm that settles gently into the quiet of the encampment. People begin to notice, conversations shorten then fade. Heads turn toward the distance, not in alarm, but with the quiet curiosity of observers, recognizing that something long expected has finally begun. Vehicles remain parked in careful rows. Cables rest across the gravel paths. Screens glow softly inside temporary shelters. Nothing changes suddenly. Preparation simply continues under a new awareness. Louise watches the aircraft approach. She does not move closer. Instead, she remains where she stands, her attention resting somewhere between the sound above and the stillness beneath her feet. Dust lifts briefly along the road as a light breeze crosses the field. The helicopters grow larger now, their shapes unmistakable against the pale sky. Sunlight glints along their sides as they move slowly toward the encampment. Still, their arrival carries no urgency. A technician nearby closes a laptop. Another adjusts a cable before stepping back. A radio murmurs briefly, then falls silent again. Louise notices the quiet coordination spreading across the camp. Small gestures, subtle signals, preparation unfolding without raised voices. Above them, the aircraft circle once. The wind shifts beneath their passing. Grass folds gently across the fields before rising again. Then, beyond the helicopters, something else becomes visible. Farther out, much farther. At first, it seems like a shadow suspended in the distance, too still to belong to any aircraft, too large to be mistaken for cloud. Louise narrows her gaze slightly. The shape remains where it is, silent, immense. The helicopters do not land immediately. Instead, they widen their circle above the encampment, their movement slow and deliberate, as though measuring the space before entering it. Wind drifts outward beneath their rotors. Dust rises along the gravel paths, lifting briefly before settling again across the quiet rows of vehicles and equipment. No one rushes. People continue working, though their attention now moves more easily toward the sky between small tasks. A cable is secured, a case is closed. Two researchers exchange a few quiet words before turning back toward their screens. The rhythm of the camp remains steady, yet something in the atmosphere has shifted. Louise continues watching the horizon. The distant shape remains difficult to hold in focus. Sometimes it disappears against the brightness of morning. Sometimes it returns again, not moving, not changing, only existing within the distance as though the sky itself has made space for it. The helicopters complete another wide arc. Their sound spreads evenly across the fields, blending with wind and distant machinery until the entire landscape seems to share the same slow vibration. Nearby, a soldier adjusts the position of a portable antenna. Another checks a tablet screen before nodding once to someone standing beside him. The gestures are small, practical, no urgency enters the movement. Louise lowers her gaze briefly. Grass bends in soft waves beyond the perimeter fence. Light rests across the open land with the same calm patience it held earlier in the morning. Nothing appears disturbed, and yet the quiet feels deeper now, not heavier, only wider, as though the space between sound and silence has stretched slightly, allowing every small movement to exist more clearly within it. When Louise looks toward the horizon again, the distant presence has not moved. It does not approach. It does not retreat. It simply remains, waiting, not to arrive, but to be noticed. The helicopters begin their descent, not directly into the center of the encampment, but toward an open stretch of ground beyond the outer vehicles, where the field widens into flat grass and gravel. Their motion remains deliberate, measured, as though the morning itself encourages restraint. Wind spreads outward beneath the rotors, brushing across tents and equipment before moving into the open fields beyond the perimeter. Dust lifts briefly along the ground and settles again. People step calmly aside from the landing area. Others remain where they are, watching. The camp continues its quiet work. Radios speak in low procedural voices. Screens glow inside temporary shelters. A vehicle door closes somewhere behind Louise with a dull metallic sound that disappears quickly into the wind. Nothing feels interrupted, yet attention now moves differently through the encampment. It travels outward, toward the same distant line of sky. Louise follows it. The shape she noticed earlier no longer dissolves into brightness. It remains visible now, not clearly defined, but undeniable. A portion of the horizon where the sky seems occupied by something vast and unmoving. Nearby, two technicians pause beside a row of equipment cases. One of them lifts his head toward the distance. The second follows his gaze. They remain silent. Across the field, small pauses ripple through the camp. A conversation ends mid-sentence. A clipboard lowers slowly. A soldier standing near the perimeter fence narrows his eyes toward the horizon before adjusting the strap of his helmet. No alarm spreads, no command is given. Only a quiet recognition moving gradually from one person to the next. Louise looks again. The distant form holds its place against the sky. It does not approach. It does not withdraw. Instead, the longer she watches, the more the open distance seems to arrange itself around it. Sky, light, and horizon quietly framing something too large to measure. The helicopters reach the ground. Their rotors continue turning slowly. Wind moves outward across the grass, and above them all, the morning sky is no longer empty. For a time, nothing changes. The helicopters remain on the ground, their rotors turning slowly as technicians and soldiers move calmly around them. Equipment cases are carried across the gravel. Radios speak in quiet bursts of procedural language. The encampment continues its measured routine, yet attention keeps returning to the same distant portion of sky. Louise notices how often people look there now. Not for long, only a second at a time, as though their eyes confirm something before returning to ordinary tasks. The horizon remains wide and pale. Clouds drift slowly across the morning light, but the space beneath them no longer feels entirely open. Louise studies the distance again. At first she sees only brightness where the sky meets the far fields. Then her perception settles. Edges begin to separate. The light changes slightly across a vast vertical shape suspended far beyond the encampment. Not moving, not arriving, simply present. For a moment the mind resists the scale of it. The shape does not resemble aircraft or structure. It holds no visible wings, no engines, no surfaces that reflect the sunlight in familiar ways. Instead, it absorbs the light around it, dark against the pale sky, yet strangely smooth, as though carved from something older than metal. The realization spreads quietly. One person notices, and then another. Conversations fade again. Across the encampment, people lift their heads toward the same point above the horizon. No signal announces the discovery. No voice names what they are seeing. Yet the recognition passes through the camp with quiet certainty. The object has been there all along, suspended in the open sky, so large that distance itself had hidden its form. Louise continues watching. The shape remains perfectly still. Wind moves across the grass. Helicopter rotors slow gradually behind her. And far above the fields, the immense dark craft rests within the morning sky, not arriving, not departing, only waiting to be understood. The encampment remains quiet for a moment after the discovery settles across the field. People look toward the horizon a final time before returning to their work. Activity begins to gather near the outer edge of the camp. Technicians carry instrument cases across the gravel paths toward a line of transport vehicles waiting beside the perimeter fence. Soldiers walk with them, checking screens and speaking in low voices while pointing briefly toward the road that leads out through the fields. The movement stays calm and deliberate, Equipment is lifted, cases are secured. A long antenna is raised beside one of the trucks and locked into position. Nearby, a researcher climbs into the back of a vehicle and arranges several sealed containers before stepping down again to clear the space for others. The helicopters now sit silent on the ground. Dust that followed their landing has settled back into the gravel. Wind moves lightly through the grass beyond the fence. Louise watches the convoy form along the narrow road leaving the encampment. Engines start quietly one after another, the sound spreading across the open land without disturbing the steady rhythm of the morning. A soldier opens the gate in the perimeter fence. The vehicles wait in place, aligned along the road that runs outward toward the distant fields. Beyond them, the landscape stretches wide and empty beneath the pale sky. Louise remains where she stands for another moment, observing the slow preparation unfolding around her. Then she turns toward the vehicles. The road ahead lies open across the fields, leading toward the distant horizon where the immense craft has taken its place above the land. The first vehicle rolls slowly through the open gate. Gravel shifts beneath its tires as it turns onto the narrow road that runs outward across the fields. The rest of the convoy follows in sequence, each truck leaving the perimeter at a measured distance from the one ahead. Dust rises lightly behind them before settling again across the grass. Louise walks toward the vehicles as they begin to move. A soldier standing beside the road lifts a hand briefly, guiding the line forward with an easy motion that needs no words. She reaches one of the transport trucks just as the passenger door opens. Inside, several researchers are already seated. Equipment cases rest between their feet, secured with straps along the floor. A small screen glows beside the driver, displaying quiet streams of numbers. Louise climbs in. The door closes. Through the window, she watches the encampment recede behind them. Rows of tents pass slowly along the road. Antennas stand above the vehicles like thin metal frames against the pale sky. A few figures remain near the landing zone, their shapes growing smaller as the convoy moves farther into the open fields. Inside the truck, the engine vibrates steadily beneath the floor. No one speaks. The road stretches forward between wide bands of grass moving gently in the wind. After a while, Louise notices the researcher beside her has stopped looking at his screen. His attention is moved to the window. Across the truck, another person does the same, a slow, almost unconscious turn of the head toward the glass. Louise follows their gaze. The object she had watched from the encampment now occupies a different portion of the sky, not wider, taller. As the convoy moves across the open land, the shape grows not outward, but upward, its upper edge rising beyond what the window frame can contain. No one comments on this. The engine continues its steady vibration. Wind moves through the grass alongside the road, and gradually, without announcement, the shape in the sky becomes too large to see all at once. The convoy slows gradually as the road narrows. The vehicles spread out along the edge of a wide clearing where the grass has been pressed flat by earlier arrivals. One by one, the trucks come to a stop, their engines settling into a quieter idle before shutting down completely. Dust drifts past the windows and fades into the wind. For a moment, no one inside the vehicle moves. The absence of engine vibration leaves the air still. Louise opens the door and steps down onto the grass. Around her, other doors open along the line of trucks. Researchers climb out carrying equipment cases. Soldiers move beside them, checking small handheld devices before lowering their gaze toward the open field ahead. The land stretches outward without obstruction. No buildings, no roads, only grass bending in long waves beneath the morning wind. People begin walking in the same direction. Louise joins them. The ground feels soft beneath her steps as she crosses the clearing. Equipment cases shift quietly in the hands of the researchers beside her. A soldier passes ahead carrying a folded tripod over his shoulder. The sound of footsteps spreads lightly through the grass. After a short distance, people ahead begin to slow their pace, not stopping, only adjusting, as though the ground itself requires more careful movement. Louise lifts her head. The structure above the field extends beyond the edges of her vision, its surface rising upward until the pale morning sky disappears behind it. The people walking beside her have become very small. Their footsteps continue at the same calm pace. Above them, the morning sky is no longer visible. The group continues walking across the clearing. The grass grows shorter beneath their steps, pressed flat in wide circular patterns where earlier teams have crossed the same ground. Equipment cases sway gently in the hands of the researchers moving beside Louise. The air feels cooler here. Wind travels differently beneath the vast structure above them, its movement slower, as though the open field has become partially sheltered. Ahead, the ground begins to change. Grass gives way to a broad surface of compacted soil and metal panels arranged across the earth in careful alignment. Temporary floodlights stand along the edges of the clearing, their tall frames silent in the morning light. The people walking ahead begin to spread out slightly as they approach the center of the site. Louise follows. Several soldiers guide the group toward a broad platform positioned directly beneath the structure overhead. Its surface is made of interlocking steel plates anchored firmly into the ground. Researchers step onto it one by one. The metal produces a faint hollow sound beneath their weight. Equipment cases are lowered. Small instruments are set along the platform's edges while technicians adjust their readings. Louise steps onto the metal surface. From here, the space above them feels closer than before. The air remains still. Wind moves across the fields beyond the clearing, but little reaches the center of the platform. People gather quietly across the structure, forming small groups beside their equipment. Above them, the immense surface rises vertically into the sky. No entrance is visible at first, only the silent structure overhead. Then a subtle change appears. High above the platform, a narrow vertical seam forms across the dark surface. The group grows still, and quietly, without announcement, the first passage into the structure begins to reveal itself. For a moment, no one moves. The narrow opening above the platform continues widening, its edges separating slowly along the vertical seam. Light from the morning sky touches the interior surface beyond it, revealing a passage that slopes gently upward into the structure. Several soldiers step forward first, carrying small instruments attached to their belts. One pauses near the base of the opening and gestures quietly for the others to follow. Researchers lift their equipment cases and begin moving across the platform toward the entrance. Louise waits until the first group has started upward before stepping closer. From beneath the opening, the interior appears dim, not dark, only receiving the morning light in a softer way, as though the surface above filters it before it reaches the floor. She steps onto the inclined surface. The material beneath her feet feels smooth and slightly cool. The slope carries her gradually upward as the sounds of the platform behind her diminish, the wind across the clearing and the distant sounds of the camp. The sky disappears behind her. Ahead, the passage opens into a wide chamber. A translucent barrier stretches across the far end of the space, its surface faintly obscured by a thin layer of vapor resting against it from the other side. People have gathered before it in a loose line, their equipment cases lowered to the floor beside them. Louise moves forward until she stands among them. The vapor shifts slowly across the barrier's surface. Behind it, the chamber remains indistinct, visible only as depth and slow movement within the pale haze. A darker form moves beyond the barrier, its outline tracing a slow arc through the vapor before softening again at the edges. The shape carries no sharp lines, no familiar geometry, only a curved and fluid presence drifting through the haze like ink spreading slowly through the water. It slows. Louise watches the outline settle into a partial stillness on the other side of the barrier. The vapor continues moving around it, thin and unhurried. The chamber holds them all. Researchers, soldiers, instruments resting along the floor, in the same suspended quiet as the shape beyond the mist remains.